Located in ancient Iraq, the Empire of Babylon stretched out under the shadow of massive fortified walls and sprawling courtyards. This was a civilization built on immense wealth and absolute architectural dominance. Ruling over this empire was King Nimrod. He possessed vast armies and endless riches, but his primary weapon was takabur, an absolute, blinding arrogance. He separated himself entirely from the masses, commanding they treat his word as divine law and his person as a living god. Nimrod dictated who ate, who starved, who lived, and who died. Over time, that unchecked authority bred a fatal delusion. He convinced himself that his total control over human society meant he actually controlled reality itself. He declared himself a god. But absolute rulers are uniquely vulnerable to fear. When an astrologer arrived at the palace, warning that a child was about to be born, a child who would dismantle Nimrod's kingdom and shatter his claim to divinity, the tyrant panicked. His response was swift and ruthless. He issued a decree banning any mother from giving birth, ordering his soldiers to slaughter every newborn boy. The streets of Babylon filled with the cries of grieving mothers as the king attempted to execute his way out of a prophecy. While the city above was consumed by bloodshed, a quiet countermove was taking place, deep inside a remote, silent mountain cavern, away from the eyes of the king's patrols. Prophet Ibrahim was born. He was raised entirely in secret, surrounded by the dark stone. The ruler commanding the largest military force on the planet had just been outmaneuvered. A helpless, hidden infant was now growing up in the shadows, quietly preparing to challenge the power structure of Babylon. When Ibrahim finally left the cave, he stepped into a society entirely surrendered to superstition. He watched his people prostrate themselves before carved statues, the moon and the stars. Even his own father managed a renowned workshop crafting these lifeless idols. This logic tree maps exactly what Ibrahim realized. He saw that the sun sets, the stars fade, and statues can be broken. He reasoned that any force of nature bound by rules, limits, or decay cannot possibly be the creator of those rules. The true creator had to be constant, unseen, and independent of these fading objects. He decided to test this logic publicly. On a day when the entire city emptied out for a massive festival, Ibrahim walked alone into their grand temple. He took an axe and methodically shattered dozens of the sacred stone figures, leaving only the largest idol intact. He then hung his axe squarely on its shoulder. The townsfolk returned to ruins. Furious, they dragged the young man before a tribunal, demanding to know if he was responsible. Ibrahim simply pointed to the massive, untouched statue and told them, "If they want to know who did this, ask the big one." The crowd erupted in anger, shouting that statues cannot speak, and that was the trap. Ibrahim calmly asked them if they knew these stones could not speak, see, or protect themselves, yet they continued to worship them. He forced an entire society to verbalize the absurdity of their own beliefs. Word of this rebellion quickly reached the palace. Soon, Ibrahim found himself standing in the royal throne room. On one side was the immense military might of Babylon, and on the other, a lone, unarmed man standing on rational faith. Nimrod mocked Ibrahim's rejection of his divinity. To prove he possessed the powers of a god, the king summoned 2 prisoners. He ordered his guards to execute one on the spot and granted the other his freedom, declaring that he controlled life and death. Ibrahim ignored the petty display of royal pardons. Instead, he delivered a devastating counter-challenge. He stated that his creator causes the sun to rise from the east every single morning. He looked at Nimrod and told him, "If you are truly a god, make it rise from the west." The entire court felt dead silent. Nimrod was completely speechless. When a tyrant's intellectual illusions are publicly destroyed, they run out of arguments. And when they run out of arguments, they inevitably fall back on brute, overwhelming violence. Furious and humiliated, Nimrod ordered the construction of a fire so massive that its heat prevented birds from even flying overhead. To bypass the intense wall of heat, his soldiers loaded Ibrahim into a massive catapult and launched him directly into the inferno. But as he fell toward the flames, the rules of nature were rewritten. A divine command descended, stripping the fire of its destructive heat. The flames were explicitly ordered to become cool, safe, and peaceful for Ibrahim. The roaring blaze raged on, but as the smoke cleared, the onlookers gasped. Ibrahim was sitting amidst the coals, entirely unharmed, radiating a profound calm. Not a single thread of his clothing was scorched. By walking out of a fire designed to obliterate him, Ibrahim left the onlookers and Nimrod with a single realization. The king's physical power stopped exactly where divine will began. That day in the ashes broke Nimrod's aura of invincibility. His grand empire, like these crumbling remnants of Babylon, was marked for a slow, humiliating ruin. History records a strange end for Babylon's legions. A suffocating cloud of millions of mosquitoes filled the darkened sky, driving the heavily armored force into chaotic, scattering madness. But Nimrod's fate was far more agonizing. A single mosquito flew up his nose and embedded itself in his brain. The man who claimed to control the sun spent his final days beating his head against the walls, tortured by relentless pain. The man who claimed mastery over the cosmos spent his final moments broken by the smallest, weakest creature. His absolute power proved as thin as the insect's wing. Babylon's physical walls eventually turned to dust, but the psychological disease of Takabur, that blinding, ego-driven arrogance, is still alive. We no longer bow to stone statues in the town square. Instead, modern society constructs its idols out of massive wealth, corporate dominance, and unchecked political power, elevating ordinary people into unreachable deities. So it leaves us with a necessary question. If the greatest tyrant in history was brought to his knees by a single insect, just how dangerously fragile is the small Nimrod hiding inside our own egos?